So, the first part of this is about ATP, and then it goes into cellular respiration, and then finally it finishes up with photosynthesis. Okay, you need to understand what ATP is, what the letters stand for, and also what ATP is made of. All right, it has three parts, and A stands for adenosine, T stands for tri, and P stands for phosphate, adenosine triphosphate. You need to understand what it looks like. You need to be able to recognize that this is adenine, a nitrogen base. This is a ribose sugar, and these are three phosphate groups. ADP is the molecule that results when energy is released by breaking the bond between the phosphates and an ATP. We acted that out in class one day. Had you guys hold hands? Remember that? Broke the bond, released the energy. Okay. So when ATP is broken down, energy is released. When we want to add energy back to it, we have to add a phosphate to fully charge it. Okay. ATP is not good for long-term energy storage. ADP is, but ATP is not. All right. The cycle is really simple. Okay. It starts out here, fully charged. It goes through the cycle, energy is released, and that is accomplished by breaking the bond between the phosphates, and then that converts ATP to ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. It has two phosphates, right? Okay. All right. Cellular respiration is this process where animals and plants take in glucose and break it down to make energy. Now, the glucose that we take in our body is called food energy. The light from the sun is called radiant energy. The glucose is called food energy. ATP is chemical energy. So we're taking food energy and converting it into chemical energy, which we use to power the processes of our cell. Okay. There are three parts: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. Sometimes the Krebs cycle is also called Calvin cycle. Okay? I'm sorry. Citric acid cycle. All right, some Krebs cycle is called citric acid cycle. And these three stages occur partly in the mitochondrion and partly in the cytoplasm. You know, all of the organelles in our cells sit inside the cytoplasm, including the mitochondria, but glycolysis happens first, okay? The first stage of respiration, glycolysis, okay? So glycolysis happens first, and then the Krebs cycle happens in here, and the electron transport chain happens in here. So the first part happens outside the mitochondria, the second happens inside, and the third one happens inside. Okay, that you need to know. The process that happens outside happens where there's no oxygen. But in here, there is oxygen. All right, glycolysis, therefore, is referred to as anaerobic. Anaerobic means no oxygen. Okay? The two that occur inside the mitochondria in the presence of oxygen are referred to as aerobic. So there are two types of respiration: anaerobic, where there's no oxygen present, and aerobic, where there is oxygen present. Okay? There's your mitochondrion. Here we go, anaerobic and aerobic. Glycolysis, first stage of cellular respiration, occurs in the cytoplasm. Glucose is broken down into the following products: So glycolysis includes some reactants. Okay. Glucose, it's broken down. That is a reactant. And the products are 2 ATP, 2 pyruvic acids, and 2 molecules called NADH. All right. You don't have to know what NADH stands for. It stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. But you don't have to worry about that. It's carrying a hydrogen ion. Okay. And the 2 pyruvic acids are from glucose. Glucose is a 6-carbon sugar, right? It's made up of 6 carbons, and they're in this chain. And during glycolysis, literally glycolysis means the splitting of glucose, okay? Anytime you see this suffix, lysis, that means to cut in two. If you recall back when we were talking about water, we split water in two, that's called hydrolysis, okay? When we have to add water to break things down, that's hydrolysis. When we remove water, that's called dehydration, right? But these two are a result of that glucose being broken down. So the 6-carbon sugar is split through the process called glycolysis, and it's split into 2 3-carbon sugars, okay? And these 3-carbon sugars are called pyruvic acid, okay? And they enter the Krebs cycle. Right? And you remember there's 2 ATP created during glycolysis, and there's 2 also created during Krebs cycle. And there's 34 created during electron transport chain. Right? So that's anaerobic. NADH is a carrier, okay? Here's what it looks like. Glucose is broken down, 2 ATP are produced, 6 carbon into 3 carbon, right? And then the NAD brings the hydrogen in and an ATP, and the resultant products are 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Again, this is all anaerobic, no oxygen. But if oxygen is present, the next step is the Krebs cycle, which takes place in the inner spaces of the mitochondria. Okay? As a result of the Krebs cycle, there are also 2 more ATP produced. Right? It is aerobic. There's oxygen present. That's aerobic. And then the last stage is called the electron transport chain. Sometimes you'll see me abbreviate it as ETC, okay, for electron transport chain. So we don't have to say it every time. NADH and FADH are carriers. You just need to remember that those things are responsible for carrying high energy hydrogen ions. Okay? Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Flavin adenosine dinucleotide. But don't worry about that. Just know that they're carriers. Right? Okay? All right. Altogether, when we're finished, there are 36 molecules of ATP that are produced from 1 glucose molecule. You need to remember that. 2 were created during glycolysis, but those 2 ATP are immediately used up. And then 2 are created during the Krebs cycle, and then 34 are created during the electron transport chain. So 2 in the Krebs, 34 in ATC, and that's a total of 36. Right. Anaerobic respiration occurs in the cytoplasm. It's called glycolysis. Aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria. That includes the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. You also need to remember the chemical equation for cellular respiration. This is glucose, right? Oxygen, they break down. These are your reactants, okay? These are the reactants. These are the products. So if you were asked on test, what are the products of cellular respiration, you have a choice. It could be carbon dioxide, it could be oxygen, it could be ATP. You'd be looking for either one of those 3 on a multiple choice test if the question says, what are the products of respiration? They could all 3 be on there, right? But those are the products of respiration, Okay, and that's the formula. It's the exact opposite for photosynthesis. Remember, we put those things out on the wall? Photosynthesis is where we break down carbon dioxide and water and convert that into glucose and oxygen. Right? All right, here's the big picture of glycolysis. Of cellular respiration. This happens outside here in the cytoplasm. No oxygen. This is anaerobic. Okay. Those two ATP are used to power the citric acid cycle, aka Krebs cycle. This happens inside the mitochondrion. This big yellow bean shape is the mitochondrion in this diagram. And then electrons are carried and transported down this membrane to generate 34 ATP from here, the ETC, the electron transport chain. Step 1 during cellular respiration. Step 1, glycolysis. Step 2, citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. Step 3, electron transport chain. Altogether, 36 ATP produced from one glucose molecule. As a result of glycolysis, as a result of anaerobic respiration in animals, lactic acid fermentation occurs. This is what causes the soreness in our muscles. Okay, you do something really quickly for a long period of time. Your body can't pump in enough oxygen to keep up with the work you're doing, so it makes ATP without oxygen. That produces a byproduct called lactic acid. It's called lactic acid fermentation. That causes a soreness. A product of anaerobic respiration in plants is called alcohol fermentation. Okay, when you put fruits like grapes in a big or corn in a big barrel and seal it up without oxygen, over time it ferments and produces alcohol, and people make drinks out of it. Okay, alcoholic fermentation is a result of anaerobic respiration in plants. Lactic acid fermentation is a result of anaerobic respiration in animals. Okay. Photosynthesis, much simpler, much simpler. Okay. Organisms that go through photosynthesis are called autotrophs. Remember that. Right. We take sunlight along with carbon dioxide and water and convert that into glucose and oxygen. Oxygen is a byproduct that the plants give off. Again, here's the chemical equation for photosynthesis. You'll notice that it's opposite respiration. Okay? The products of cellular respiration are here now. Photosynthesis takes the products of cellular respiration and converts those into glucose and oxygen, which are the reactants of respiration. This is photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide, water, ATP yields glucose and oxygen. You got to know that chemical equation. Okay? There are two types of reactions during photosynthesis. One occurs in the presence of sunlight. One part of this process has to have sunlight, and the other part of it does not. The part that has to have sunlight is called the light dependent, because it is depending on the light to help it finish the process. Okay? The second part of photosynthesis does not depend on light, so it is called independent. So you got light dependent. Remember that the first part depends on sunlight. The second part doesn't need sunlight. It's independent, kind of like a teenager. Okay? All right. Light independent, light dependent. That's a complicated diagram. Okay? Again, I'm recording this, and you guys can watch it anytime you want to if you need to. Light independent reactions are called the Calvin cycle, sometimes referred to as the dark reactions because there's no light. Okay? Light independent, second part happens without sunlight, also called Calvin cycle, also called dark reactions. Okay? This is where carbon dioxide comes in with ATP and hydrogen ions, and they produce glucose. Okay? The first part produces oxygen as a byproduct, takes in water and sunlight and breaks down the water, gets rid of the oxygen part of the water, keeps the hydrogen part of the water, sends it over to the dark cycle so it can be used with the carbon dioxide to make glucose. Okay? So if I'm taking in water, I think I got a diagram here. If I'm taking in water, okay, remember we did this one? So I take in water, I split the water. What do we call it when we split water? Hydrolysis. Okay, so we split water. Look, here's part of the water right here, right? Is this not part of the water molecule? Yes. When we split the water, we split it into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is given off as a waste product. Plants give off oxygen. The hydrogen then is used right here. It's carried over to the stroma to help generate and kick off the reactions in the dark cycle. Okay, so water is split, the oxygen is given off, and the hydrogen goes over here. That happens during the light reactions. This is called light dependent. Okay, and then over here the carbon dioxide comes in. Look, we carry this hydrogen, and then you bring in carbon and oxygen, and what do you have? You got a hydrogen coming in, you got a carbon coming in, and an oxygen coming in. You got a CHO. Okay, that's what's coming out down here. C6H12O6. There's enough hydrogens, okay? Remember there's H2, right? More hydrogens than oxygens. And then eventually it creates C6H12O6. That's the product of photosynthesis, okay? So what are the two products of photosynthesis you see on this diagram? What are the two things that come out of this? What are the two things that come out of this? Glucose and oxygen. Those are the products of photosynthesis. What are the reactants of photosynthesis? Light, water, and carbon dioxide. Those are the reactants of photosynthesis. Again, what are the products of photosynthesis? Glucose and oxygen. Okay, the products of photosynthesis, oxygen and glucose. Going back to the chemical equation. All right, let's go back to the chemical equation of photosynthesis. Where is it? Hello? Okay, remember? Reactant, 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 product, product. Okay? Not only do you need to know the equation, but you also need to know how they come in and how they go out. What part comes in first with what? Water and sunlight are used to break down the water. Water is split into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released and given off into the atmosphere. The hydrogen is used to power the Calvin cycle. And then the carbon dioxide comes in along with that hydrogen to make CHO. Okay? Does that make sense? You just have to keep kind of, if you want to do good on this stuff, you got to read a little bit about it every day. Okay? Just 30 minutes a day. Just take some time and just kind of review over. Take a PowerPoint and go through it. Quiz yourself. Go back over it. Got to do better on the ones you got wrong. Got semester exams coming up. Case 21. Okay. Chloroplast is where it all goes down. Okay. Remember we got light dependent, light independent. We got ATP. It's used. We got hydrogen ions. We make glucose. Okay. All right. So bottom line, these two processes are basically the reverse of each other. That you need to understand. Photosynthesis is the building process of respiration. And respiration is a tearing down. Okay, photosynthesis builds up, makes something, and then respiration breaks it down. Okay, and this is kind of a look of the cycle of what's going on here. You know, plants are giving this stuff off, animals are taking it in. They're eating the plants, breaking it down to energy, giving off carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere. Okay, and here's a little chart that helps you compare the two, where everything takes place. And that's it. Okay. 8A people, if you haven't been in here yet, remember you have a quiz today on your flashcards. I'm sure your B-Day friends can tell you all about it. Oh, who's that walking out the room?
Can I just email you what time it was?
You can't remember.
But I'll just say connected soon.
Please. Where? In the big part. It's under the candy.
Man, you're so neat.
She is.
Y'all have to come in
No.
But I don't get what
I have an 80 in
here?
here.
Does that help today?
Is that on canvas?
Oh shoot, I gotta stop recording.
Mr. King, that quiz that we took was so hard.
I know.
Did we even